Welcome back to the program. We are joined today by Ramzy Ezzeldin Ramzy, a retired ambassador, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, and Deputy Special Envoy for Syria. Senior Undersecretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Egypt. So, welcome to the program. I hope I got that part of your CV there accurately.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is quite accurate.
One of the reasons I really wanted to speak with you today is all these major disruptions we're seeing across the Middle Eastern region, and they all seem to be interconnected. A good place to start, I guess, would be Israel, as this tends to touch on many of the issues in the regions. How do you see the possibility of the conflict disrupting the wider region that is fueling instability in places like Egypt, Jordan, or other regions?
Well, you're absolutely right. Everything is interconnected. It has always been, and I think it will always be the case. And obviously, for historic reasons, that is the case. Now, what is happening in Israel, or rather, Israel's policies in the region, are of course highly disruptive. Israel has, regrettably, I think, decided to impose its vision of regional security on all the countries in the region. It's started by Gaza and it continues in Gaza. That hasn't stopped. It moved to Lebanon, moved to Syria, and lately it was Iran. And there is pushback. You can tell that there is pushback. Even the Americans may not be sold 100% on the Israeli vision. They are close. The Trump administration is close to Israel, but you can see some divergence, and I think that is quite important, because if Israel were to pursue its designs on the region, it will further destabilize the region, and that will not be in the interest of Israeli security. So, I think we need, all of us in the region and beyond, whether in Europe or the United States, to make the Israeli public understand that pursuing hegemony in the Middle East does not serve its long-term interests. The best way to do that is to have a balanced regional security system that takes into account the interests of all countries. And this is a difficult task to accomplish. I mean, acknowledged by everyone in the region that the Palestinian issue is at the core of instability in the region. Israel had managed before 2023 to convince many, both in the region and outside the region, that the Palestinian issue was not the most important conflict in the region, and that there were many other issues in the Middle East, and then you could actually have peace and stability in the Middle East without resolving the Palestinian issue. I think the Gaza events have basically buried this argument for good, and so we need to do something there now. But also, Israel is pursuing a destabilizing policy in Lebanon. You can see what there is an agreement that they have refused to pull out under different pretexts. They have again undertaken certain actions inside Syria and continue to do so, although that Syria will not be a threat to any country in the region. And yet the Israelis have intervened militarily on many occasions, and they continue to do so, particularly in the south. And that is highly destabilizing a regime that has just come into power and is trying to get its footing correct. And the Israelis, certainly by their actions, are not helping. And then we go to Iran. Iran's military capabilities have been degraded, but I don't see the Israelis accomplished any of their goals, whether it's in Iran, Syria, Lebanon, or Gaza. You can go through each one of them and you will see that they have not accomplished their goals. Now, when it comes to my country, Egypt, and of course, to some extent, Jordan, I cannot speak for Jordan, but I think they are in similar situations. The Israeli policy has been by the present government to displace the Palestinians. I mean, no matter what they say, I think their policy has, they proved it, I think, time and again, that they would like to displace as many Palestinians as possible by making their life unbearable, both in Gaza and the West Bank. And any displacement of the Palestinians does affect Egyptian national security. I mean, we have made very clear we will support the Palestinians in requests for a homeland, requests for an independent state, but accept them inside Egypt means that we're basically an accomplice to the Israeli designs, which is basically to put an end to the possibility of a Palestinian state. And I think Egypt's position has been absolutely critical in ensuring that the Israelis cannot pursue their objective towards flourishing. And I think that has been very clear. We hope that the Israelis will reconsider their policies, and they will only do so if they are, if they realize that they no longer have strong allies. I mean, even the United States, there's already some change in the United States towards Israel. I think Europe is more advanced in that sense, but I think much more needs to be done by the Europeans. So it is a collective effort by the Europeans, by the Americans, but certainly by the Arabs to make the Israeli public understand that the present government policies are highly disruptive and will not bring security to the Israeli.
You mentioned the interventions by Israel in the southern parts of Syria, but more the overall picture of Syria. How stable is the situation now with the new government under Jolani since Assad was removed from power? Because again, yes, the Israelis are quite disruptive, but there's also a lot of other variables at play, which makes uncertainty about how stable Syria will be into the future.
You're absolutely right. The situation in Syria is highly, but Israel is actually do not help the government in stabilizing the country. You're talking about neutralizing the entire south of Syria, not and Syria needs like any country in the world needs a functioning, efficient army, which they do not have, largely thanks to what the Israelis have done. They basically destroyed all the military assets that Syria possesses. So in that sense, Israel is not helping. But you are right. There are problems with the Druze, which the Israelis are exploiting. There are problems with the Alawites, with the Kurds. But this is something that needs to be solved over time. The government has made some movement, but in my view, not sufficient. It needs to do more. And I think it is finally understanding that it really needs to do more. And so we have to give it the benefit of the doubt. We have to keep on pushing it to take the right decisions, to be an inclusive regime that includes everyone. You don't expect that to happen in a short period of time. You're talking about 1 year, more or less, 11 months since the present government has come into power. And you've had a regime that was in place for 50 years with all its difficulties and problems. So it will take time, but Arabs, Europeans, and the Americans need to help the present Syrian government to take the right decisions. The alternative, unfortunately, is a lot worse in the sense that if there's a collapse in Syria, there will be destabilization everywhere in the region. And that has to be avoided. So I think the only thing that can be done, and which most countries are pursuing right now, is to put in place guardrails that will guide and make sure that the present Syrian government moves in the right direction without any excesses, and ensuring that Syria is for all. Not easy, like I said, it will take time, but the alternative is going to be a lot worse.
Well, one of the things which is emerged in Syria, which is not unique to Syria though, is the rise of all these non-state actors, which tend to work with state actors as well. Um, it's again, it's not a new phenomenon, but it does appear that this is something that is becoming more frequent. Do you calculate this into the wider challenges of the region?
Obviously, I mean, you have it in Syria, you have it in Lebanon, you have it in Iraq, uh, uh, and this is quite concerning. So yes, in Syria, non-state actors. I mean, we have all these armed groups that are part of the coalition that is governing Syria today. Some of them do not answer to the president. They pursue their own agendas. Yes, the most of them, as you know, armed groups who are part of the governing coalition, at least it appears to be. And need to be, like I said, incorporated in the army. I mean, the government has announced it's doing that, but it hasn't really happened in an effective manner. Or they just have to be completely decommissioned. Nobody wants to uh, receive their nationals who are in Syria and, as part of armed groups. So we will have to find a way, maybe to keep them even in Syria, but without being part of any armed group. We'll have to find a way, and that is for the government to do, and it would need international regions.
The other state actors which are involved in Syria, uh, because Turkey obviously has great influence, United States, as you mentioned before, Israel in the south, but also the Russians maintain also their presence. How how does this impact the ability of Syria to function? Do you see their interest being competing, or are they so far able to put this rivalry aside as Syria's attempts to stabilize?
Well, I mean, when it comes to Syria, I think the United States and Israel have common. Uh, Russia, as you know, did have a lot of influence. I don't think it has the same amount of influence anymore. Uh, I I just wrote an article recently, basically describing the pragmatic retreat of Russia in the Middle East. So it's not just Syria. Syria, where it suffered the most, but it's even on the Palestinian issue and on Iran, Lebanon. Russia has its own priorities away from the Middle East. So I don't think Russia is in a position to influence things at this stage. Uh, Interests of Russia at this point is to maintain their two military bases. And so far, it seems they have some control. What new arrangements will be worked out? I think things will transpire in time, but I'm pretty sure the Russians will be able to maintain some sort of military presence in the coastal region. Now, the United States and Israel share one thing, which is the security of Israel, and so far as the Israelis are concerned, the security of Israel means the neutralizing, in a military sense, the entire southern part of Syria. And I don't see the Americans minding that very much, although that I think will undermine the stability in Syria. Turkey has, in my view, legitimate interests in the northern part of Syria because they have 900-kilometer border. And so they have legitimate interests there, but not to the extent that it can intervene at will whenever it wants, militarily, otherwise. Presently, I think Turkey is trying to stabilize the government. It is helping the government to function as a proper government. Uh, it does have a problem with the Kurds. The government, as you know, there are negotiations between the governments and the Kurds. So these are the main players at this point inside Syria. Of course, Iran used to quite substantial influence. I don't think it has them at this stage, and I don't think it's going to have any influence in the foreseeable future. There are competing agendas. The Turks and the Israelis are, I think, following each other's policy very carefully, because there could be, and I think neither wants it, but it could happen, that there could be some sort of military confrontation inside Syria. And this is not in the interest of either country, or certainly not Syria. But it is possible that would happen. The Arab countries have an interest in a stable, strong Syria, but they have to compete with the others. They have chosen, particularly the Gulf countries, have chosen to finance Syrian development. I don't think they're going to go beyond that. And that is absolutely critical if you want stability. It's a touch and go situation, different interests, but that may be opposed in some instances. But ultimately, everyone, I think, with the exception of Israel, I mean, I have to say the Israelis have made very clear they want a weak Syria, and they can live with a divided Syria. The Americans, I think, made it clear that they don't want a divided Syria, but they may accept a weak Syria. The Turks do not want a divided Syria, because that brings into question immediately to the table the issue of the Kurds. The Arabs do not want a divided Syria, because a divided Syria will have regional implications for Jordan, for Iraq, for Lebanon, and so forth. So, like I said earlier, I think we all need to work together, both regional powers and great powers. The United States and Russia hopefully will be able to work out something. Now, China has economic interests, but I don't think it is pursuing it aggressively at this point. I think it is waiting for the situation to stabilize before it is able to jump in the face, so to speak.
Well, yeah, the last country I want to ask about is also one which you have been engaged with directly, which is Iran, because of course we had the attacks on Iran's nuclear reactors back in June, but many are, well, less, at least the Iranians seem more or less convinced that the conflict or the war is not over yet, and indeed some interpreted the European snapback sanctions as a way of possibly, maybe deliberately, not deliberately, but to pave the way for yet another escalation. Do you see do you see the possibility, or how do you see these conflicts progressing from here on?
I am quite concerned. I am quite concerned because, for two reasons. One, I sense a defiance inside Tehran. I speak and meet Iranians, and they all are in a defiant mood, in the sense that they expect another Israeli attack, and they want to be prepared for it. At the same time, they will not give up on their nuclear ambitions. Now, what are their nuclear ambitions? I mean, like you said, I have worked on this issue since 2003, since my time as the permanent representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Well, clearly, they want a nuclear potential. I do not think they have taken a decision to produce a nuclear weapon. And I think most of the world understands that. Even the American intelligence says that. I mean, the only ones who have been saying since 2003, I mean, not now, since 2003, that the Iranians are a few months away from producing a weapon. It's been 22 years. So that is one reason I am concerned, because I don't think the Iranians will show much flexibility. They want another agreement. They're prepared, and I think they were negotiating with the Americans. That would preserve a number of things that the Americans have said they don't want. But, I mean, for example, enrichment. I mean, I don't think they're going to give up on that. Maybe we'll find a way to fudge the issue, but they will never give up the right to enrichment. The Israelis will only be comfortable if there is regime change in Iran. And I think that is their objective. I think they will continue to do whatever it takes to ensure that there is a regime change. Now, will Israeli action bring about regime change in Iran? On the contrary, I see now people, as you know, they're rallying around the flag. So you may have concerns, reservations about the regime in Iran, but it's only the Iranians who are going to change that regime, and I don't see any aptitude or interest in doing that at this stage. So I do not foreclose the possibility of another Israeli attack, because the Iranians will appear to be not cooperating enough unless they start negotiating with the Americans. And the Israelis want to pursue regime change. So they'll keep on doing that, hoping that one day, if you recall, every time or once in a while, including after the latest attack, the Prime Minister of Israel would come up and issue a call to the Iranian people to rise up against the regime. So I mean, it's there, and they will only feel comfortable if there is a regime change, which I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. In the long term, maybe it will be changed, but it has to be organic. It has to come from within Iran. But imposing it from outside, on the contrary, Iranians are extremely nationalistic, and I think they will continue to defy Israel.
Well, I was back. I was in Tehran back in May. Yeah, a month before the attack on their nuclear reactors, and we got to speak to some of their officials when I visited one of the nuclear facilities, and they made the point that their key concern was that they were always willing um, to have transparency to show that they weren't pursuing any nuclear weapons, but that the Americans especially were always trying to pack in a lot of geopolitical issues, which was tantamount to capitulation. That is, limitations on their ballistic missiles, limitations on their foreign partnerships. They shouldn't have any relationship with Hezbollah, Hamas, or Yemen. Is there any? Is there any leniency on the other side, do you think, of the United States to essentially isolate the nuclear issue on its own? Because it seems that would be a necessity in order to, reach a new agreement.
Oh, well, at this stage, it doesn't appear to be the case. But let me take you back to 2003, 2000, when I was in Vienna, and the negotiations had started. They started with the Europeans, the Russians, and Chinese, and as you know, until 2005, I think the Americans did not participate in these negotiations. At that time, two things. Had they been pursued, I think we would never be where we are. One, the Iranians at the time were talking about a grand bargain, everything on the table, including their policy in the region, and the Americans completely refused. Now, whether it was going to be possible or not, but I don't think that was on the table at the time. Another issue at the time, and it was a proposal by then the Director General of the IEA, Dr. Baradei. He put forward a proposal whereby Iran would satisfy itself with a pilot project of containing 50 centrifuges, no more. And the Iranians indicated their acceptance to that. It was refused on the others. Can you imagine if that had been accepted then, where we would have been today? Today, the Iranians have thousands and thousands of new generations. So it looks like the Americans are insistent on two things. One is no enrichment, which I think, in my view, is not going to be accepted by Iran. It has the right. It is a member of the NPT. They have the right to enrich, provided it is under IEA safeguards. They've accepted that, and I think that, in my view, is sufficient. The Americans seem to be insistent. I mean, although their positions has shifted sometimes, but that there is no enrichment on Iranian territory. I think there can be a way to address that issue in a way that both countries can live with, and there are a number of ideas in this regard. But the issue of ballistic missiles is, as I said, it has become even more important for the Iranians as a deterrence after what has happened uh, last summer. This was the only way that they could retaliate. And if they're deprived of that, then there is absolutely no way that they can retaliate against Israel. So I'm not sure they would be willing to compromise there unless they receive ironclad guarantees from the United States and maybe even beyond that this would not happen. Now, I'm not sure if the United States is in a position to do that.
My last question though is, how do you see the possibility of some greater reconciliation between Iran and the Gulf states? Because these tensions, of course, define many of the problems in the regions, and also tensions which are often exploited as well by third parties.
Well, you see, I mean, if you look at the trajectory of Iranian Gulf relations, in fact, not just Gulf, but also with Egypt, over the past 2 or 3 years, I think it's been a positive one. And I think it will continue in that direction. Uh, for a certain period of time, it appears that Gulf states were convinced that Iran was the main threat. I think after what has happened in Gaza, I think that has changed. I think that has changed, and I think Israel is being increasingly seen as the main threat. And so the relations between the Gulf states and Iran have improved, and I think they will continue to improve, and it's in the interests of both countries. And I think Iran has to rethink, and I think there's already talk about that, rethink its regional uh, policies. It's this issue of forward defense, as you know, which has been uh, a pillar of its military doctrine, using proxies in Syria and Lebanon, elsewhere, to further its interests and act as a deterrence against Israel. It clearly has failed. And it's in Iran's interest to have good relations with all its Arab neighbors and cooperate ultimately in establishing a regional security system that takes into account the interests of all countries, certainly Iran, the Arab countries, Turkey. And I've always said, ultimately, Israel, when it reverses its policy, when Israel no longer seeks to impose its own vision of regional security and act as a hegemon in the region, I think that will be possible down the road, provided Israel does change its policy. So yes, no, I think relations between Iran and the Arab countries in general, I think they will continue to improve because it's in the interest of both to do that.
Well, thank you for taking the time, and it's crazy to see how fast the changes are happening now. One always makes the point that the Middle East is always undergoing big changes, but this seems to be unusual. So thank you so much for taking time.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.